including during construction, bins collected from High Street only, and it supports the recommendations of the Parish Council. So the application site is hatched on this plan, as you can see. It is land to the rear of 17 High Street in Bluntisham. The application site is located within the Bluntisham Conservation Area, and whilst there are no immediate adjacent listed buildings, you can see in pink the surrounding listed buildings to the north, south and west of the application site. The site includes the vehicle access from High Street, so positioned here, to the side of the host dwelling there at the top, number 17. And then it takes in a large part of what was the former garden of number 17, which is now used as storage, and part of the rear garden. Sorry? Do you want me to go back? No, that's okay. Do you want me to start again?
No.
Yeah, I was going to continue.
It's okay. Right, that's fine. So apologies. No, that's fine. So the vehicle access here is from the High Street. This part of the site was formerly part of the rear garden of number 17, and it's now been used for storage. And this part of land here is to the rear of number 15, but it's now within the ownership of the applicant. The application site is located in flood zone 1 with a low risk of groundwater flooding. There's a public right-of-way footpath just down the site here, to the rear of the site, adjacent to Orchard End Road here. The application site is located on one of the main roads through the village. The surrounding land uses are predominantly residential. Apart from the pub on the opposite side of the road here, the Swan, and then further up here, the hairdressing. The character of this part of the High Street is generally detached houses located on or close to the proximity to the road frontage with long rear gardens. Whilst there are some examples of existing in-depth cul-de-sac developments along the High Street, for example, the Shires here to the south, Walnut Tree Close on the opposite side here, and then further up at Sawyer's Close here. These are historic and very much different from what is proposed under this application, in that the vehicle access to these are generally wider and provide proper road access into the site. They have greater separation distances with the frontage properties on either side of the accesses, and they generally serve a small group of houses rather than the single dwelling proposed here. This is not the character of this part of the High Street, which is a very narrow vehicle access, as you can see, to the north of the application property. It currently serves only the rear garden and accesses of the existing house, and is not wide enough for 2 cars to pass, and it's in very close proximity to the host dwelling. In the application submission, there is mention on the opposite side of the road, so I'll take you down here to number 22 High Street, that an application was made last year for demolition of the agricultural building and erection of 5 dwellings. This application was refused under delegated powers in September last year on 3 grounds. 1, failure to respect the character and appearance of the surrounding area, eroding the open characteristic of the site and undermining the historic relationship between the fields and historic pattern of the settlement. This was felt would cause harm to the setting of the listed buildings and the character of the conservation area, and the public benefits in that instance did not outweigh the harm. The second reason for refusal was in respect of the impact on one of the neighbouring properties in terms of overbearing and overshadowing impacts. And the third reason, because they didn't have a UU to allow for the provision of wheel bins. So if we just move on, this is the Google aerial shot of the site. It shows that generally adjacent and surrounding houses in this immediate vicinity are frontage properties with long rear gardens that back onto the public right-of-way at the rear of the site here and the Orchard End Road here. There are no properties on the application site of Orchard Road, as you can see here. They're all on the opposite side of the road which front on, and it's not until you get further down the street here to the north of the church, where there's that small cul-de-sac development that I showed you earlier. So we'll just take a look at some photos of the site. So this is the frontage of the site from the high street. It shows the property number 17 on the right hand side of the photo. Where the truck is parked, this would be the vehicle access to the new bungalow at the rear. It shows the adjacent property number 19 on the left here. It shows their gravel access, driveway and parking area as well. So this is another photo from the frontage from High Street. You can see there's two cars parked in front of the house, and where the truck is parked, that would be the shared access along the side of the house to the rear garden. So this is a photo of the access road. You can see it's quite narrow. There's only room for one vehicle to pass, and you can see that the property's got some ground floor windows in close proximity to the road. So this is a photo looking back towards the high street. So you can see the rear of the property number 17. You can see the access driveway. You can just see the truck parked at the right of the property there. That's the shared vehicle access that we can see in front of us. So this is probably just stood a little bit further back into the site. You can see the access. You can see the property, adjacent property here, the back of number 17 here. So these are the outbuildings that are to the back of number 17. So these are going to be retained for that property. You can see it's a garage and some storage. So the vehicle access that will be shared will be to access these buildings as well as the bungalow to the rear. So this photo is looking towards Orchard End Road. So this is the site where the proposed bungalow is going to be, and you can see that it's just been used for sort of storage at the moment. So this is another photo. It's looking towards Orchard End Road. You can see the back boundary has got a sort of high hedge. It's proposed to reduce that in height to maximum 2.5 metres. And this is looking northwards where the proposed bungalow is going to be. And you can see the back of the houses further up the street. I think that was Sawyer's Close. So this is the proposed site layout. You can see the footprint of the bungalow here at the rear. You can also see the two proposed car parking spaces for the property positioned adjacent to the left here. These are the existing outbuildings that we saw in the photograph, and this is the shared access drive which runs along the side of the property, which we use for the house and for access to these buildings at the rear for the front property. The pedestrian access you can see here is going to be retained onto Orchard End Road. And as I said, the existing hedge along here is to be reduced in height to 2.8 metres. 1.8 metre close boarded fence is proposed along the northern boundary and southern boundaries here. So this just shows the elevation and floor plans. It's a 3-bedroom single-storey bungalow that's being proposed. And again, these are just some sections. So the top sections run from the high street on the left. You can see the property's number 17, the existing house. And at the top, you can see the proposed bungalow superseded on the plans. The sections at the bottom, that shows how the house will look from the high street, looking down the site, and you see the frontage of the bungalow. So the Conservation Officer and Urban Design Officer have objected to the proposal on the grounds of being out of keeping with the established linear and frontage character and pattern in this part of the conservation area, and it feel that it creates a poor legibility with the high street. They feel the subdivision of the plot would erode the spacious open character of the area, and that the bungalow's design is of limited interest and has little relevance to the architecture of the conservation area. Officers are in agreement with these concerns that have been raised, and therefore the first recommended reason for refusal is the proposal would result in development that by virtue of its design location would result in the introduction of tandem form of development that is out of keeping with the prevailing character and grain of development along this part of the High Street, which does not respect the character, appearance and form of the conservation area. Whilst the harm is less than substantial, there would be no public benefits to outweigh this harm. Therefore, it is contrary to policy and recommended for refusal. The second reason for refusal, the Highways team do not support the shared access proposed. They gave previous advice that were the new bungalow and the existing houses to have separate accesses, then vehicle-to-vehicle displays would not be required. Therefore, the second recommended reason for refusal is that the proposed development would result in intensification of the existing access to the shared access for the existing dwelling and the proposed dwelling. Due to this, the proposed access would not be able to achieve the appropriate vehicle-to-vehicle visibility displays. This would result in highways safety dangers and would be contrary to policy. As per the update report, the third reason for refusal has been addressed by the agent by the submission of a unilateral undertaking to secure the provision of wheel bins. Therefore, this reason for refusal has been removed. The officer recommendation is therefore 1 to refuse on 2 reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers for this particular application. Our first speaker is an objector, Joanne Easter. Would you like to come and join us? You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and once you start speaking, the timer will start. If you press the middle button, and then the top will light up.
Okay, I own number 15 High Street. When my late husband and I sold the land to Mr. and Mrs. Hodson, it was with the agreement that we would buy back the land at a specified amount plus 1,500, the original amount of sale plus 1,500. So when they put the house up for sale, I told them I wished to buy it back. I was then treated in a very harsh way, told that the property, I would now have to pay double what the agreement had been. I still have the money to buy back the plot of land. I do not...
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to just stop for a moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. I'm so sorry, but what you're saying is not material planning consideration and won't be taken into account by the councillors. I understand. I'm really sorry, but the members can only decide the application on material planning applications, and what you have there is a disagreement with your neighbour, and that's a civil issue and not for one before the planning committee. Sorry.
Thank you. We have another speaker for this particular application, which is the agent Lee Bevans. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Hear me now? Sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. We were advised to submit a pre-application inquiry and did so back in February 2023 for a 4-bedroom chalet bungalow. We worked with the highway officer to find a solution to the access, which he was satisfied with. Whilst the design of the proposal was considered unacceptable by virtue of its scale, the pre-application specifically noted that the principle of one dwelling may therefore be acceptable and was unlikely to conflict with policies LP2 and LP9. It was in the pre-application response that the Conservation Officer noted we should not remove the complete section of wall adjacent to the High Street, even though this is a modern wall built about 4 years ago and went against what Highways requested. We were asked to instruct a heritage consultant should the scheme progress to a planning application, which, given the supporting principle for a dwelling, the client did. The consultant raised no impact issues on the conservation area, given the distance from heritage assets and listed buildings. The full application for a 3-bedroom bungalow was submitted some 7 months later after careful analysis of the site, and input from consultants and not just some knee-jerk application. It is disappointing that the officer deems the scheme for refusal, given the significant effort that has taken place and the fact that the officer did not engage with us once in the planning process, despite many attempts to speak with her. Referring to the two reasons for refusal, the Conservation Officer has a complete opposite view to our heritage consultant, who noted that the application site is too far away from any listed building for that proposal to affect their special interest, and the proposal, by nature of its small-scale backland layout and the materials from which it will be constructed, will preserve the character and appearance of the Bluntisham Conservation Area. Sayers Court in the Shires are modern backland developments separated by a small number of semi-detached and detached dwellings. It's the second reason, the proposal development will not intensify the existing access. Members may be aware that originally 17 High Street did not have a front driveway and used to have a gravelled access down to the double garage and carport. This served as parking for 17 High Street. Now that the parking for 17 High Street is provided at the front, this means that the access can be used solely to serve the new proposed dwelling. 19 High Street next door did not originally have a gravel driveway to the property. We had a solution that was agreed with Highways at pre-application stage, but the Conservation Officer wanted the modern, recently built wall to remain, and therefore goes against the Highway advice. Who is right? The combined width of the opening between 19 High Street and the wall of 17 High Street is 8.8 metres. We feel that this is more than adequate to serve the dwelling. The Parish Council support the application, and we're happy to amend the bin collection point to come from High Street, and the nearby compost heap has been completely removed. The dwelling responds to the context and is modest in scale. It's been positioned to avoid impact on the retained trees and provide a good level of amenity space and parking. It'll provide a bungalow which there is a genuine shortage of in the village, and materials can be conditioned to ensure it's sympathetic to the location. The scheme is a sustainable proposal for the site and will support local shops, businesses and facilities, and the benefits do outweigh the harm. I therefore ask members to go against officer recommendation, given the consistent advice given between pre-application stage and planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any members that have any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming to see us this evening. So I want to ask you about the Highway opinion on this, because our report says that the County Council highways still have concerns raised. That's at 5.2. So could you just clarify what your current understanding of the situation is?
Sorry. When we dealt with the pre-application stage, we were suggesting to take the whole of that section of wall down at the front, which is a modern wall built about 4 years ago, so that 17 High Street could drive straight on, basically from High Street onto the front garden, which has been block paved. That meant that there was a much more significant width to access down to the plot at the back. The fact that the Conservation Officer is saying that the wall needs to be retained, which is a little bit bizarre, means that the access has obviously come in because the wall is between the wall and 19. But we did have a lot of conversations with Robin Hobbs about it on Highways.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes.
Thank you. So the site itself is not a listed building, and on either side they're not listed buildings, but it is part of the conservation area. And the character statement for that area is for a prevailing, largely derived from a few substantial detached listed properties sited on back of footpath locations. In what ways would you say the design is sympathetic to that character assessment of the historic area?
It's a single-storey dwelling that's set back. We can't, you can see that from the drawings that have been presented. If you look at the opposite side of the road, there are a lot of buildings that are the back edge of footpath. On this side of the road, you can see that between the Shires and Sayers Court, that they're large, modern, detached dwellings that use a multitude of materials. What we're trying to do with the bungalow is use modern methods of construction and make it sustainable, and that is a move on from days gone by. We're not, we're trying to move forward with modern methods of construction, and design is subjective. So, we can't always rely on the past to design.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you very much for addressing the committee this evening. We will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Are there any questions of clarification from councillors? Councillor Dew.
Can I just pick up on the point that was made regarding the retention of the wall and therefore the visibility display not working? I can't find anything in here relating to this. It might be I'm not looking properly, but can you guide me on that, please? Would you mind? Thank you.
Yes, of course. I think the first thing I would guide you to is probably 5.2 in the report, which is the Highway Authority comments. And it said that in the first sort of part, it says the proposal is not in accordance with previous correspondence regarding acceptable layout. And what I might just try and show you is where we're getting to. So at the moment, the access at the front shared between both the properties. I think what the highway said previously was if that single access to the side only served the existing property at the back, then it would be acceptable because it's an existing access serving one property. Then they would have to take down the wall, like you see on the frontage, and then put the car park in for number 17 at the front. I think in the pre-app, the urban design officer said it's never ideal to take down front boundary walls. It wasn't a reason that they were going to refuse it, but their preference would have been to retain that wall. But actually, highway safety probably trumps the preference to have a nice wall on the front of the property. I do believe that the conservation officer and urban design officer in the pre-application advice both raised concern about the character, this backland location, the prevailing character, and I think perhaps the applicant and agent have latched onto this boundary wall and maybe got confused. I hope that's answered the question.
Are there any more questions of clarification for our planning officer? There are no other questions, so we'll move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Mockball.
Thank you, Chair. Going on to the point where about highways, it was said that, I think the agent just said that the path, the driveway would only be used by the bungalow, but that's not true because there are outbuildings which the host dwelling would need to use. So how would it be an isolated access just for the bungalow when you've got two outbuildings? So for me, this is a really clear refusal because it's in the conservation area. It's not, it doesn't respect the conservation area. I think the agent was talking about how the other houses are to the left or to the right have, you know, different characteristics, but that's because they're outside of the conservation area. So for me, this is really straightforward, but I'm happy to let members go on and have a discussion. And if you need a proposal, I'm also here.
Any other councillors wish to contribute? Councillor Dew.
Thank you very much. Yeah, picking up on the back of that, it's an interesting one in the sense that, you know, we've got to balance different policies off against one another. And as this application stands, and the probably the highways ones are more important of all of the two. You know, those of you who know me long while, I'm a great fan of listed buildings and conservation areas and doing everything we can to protect them. But you know, at the end of the day, if the wall's got to remain, which the planning off the conservation officers feel that it has to, and I'm not going to disagree with them, they're the experts in that area. It means we then got to look at the how that impacts upon the highway safety. And I'd agree with Councillor Mockball. You know, the highway safety element there does trump it, and got to remember that the high street is a main road in the village, and people do move along that on a regular basis. So it needs to be as safe as possible. I think it's one of those where, you know, if we're being told that visibility display is not enough to make it safe by the expert highways officers, we'd be very foolish to ignore them. Other than that, I do have a problem with the sort of former tandem development. I thought we'd got away from that over the years, and I accept the fact that, you know, we've got a scruffy parcel of land at the back there, but I don't think just because it's a scruffy parcel means we have to put anything on it. It means it might need tidying up, but that's a different issue altogether, and I think we need to look at that separately. So overall, I'm quite uncomfortable with it, but once again, I'm prepared to listen to what comes from the rest of the members and see where we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dew. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Quite obviously, I know this area quite well, and that High Street is a particularly busy route through, and I think that access is a real issue. Myself, you know, we're going to add to it, and I think the visibility, especially if you're coming out of there and looking right towards East Street, I think that's a considerable issue because traffic coming down from, I think it's the north, coming round from East Street onto the High Street. There's a sharp bend there. Those of you, I'm sure most of you have actually been down there and seen it. It's not particularly easy when you come round there. And on that aspect, I think it is a major issue from a highway perspective. I also think it is out of character. I mean, it's not necessarily shoehorning in it, but it's trying to squeeze an access in to get to some access at the back. And tandem development, I don't think is overly acceptable. I know some do go through it. It has been allowed in advance. But in a conservation area with listed buildings close by, I personally don't think this is the right sort of application for this site. Obviously, there is concern that if you were to utilise the access at the back, orchard end, which hasn't been requested, that would obviously again be intensification down that area as well. So on that balance, I think the officer's got it right on this one and the refusal, and I'm prepared to put that through as a proposal that we recommend refusal in line with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Niche. I'll accept that proposal. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Thank you. So there are two reasons for the recommended refusal. The first being what the officer is judged to be less than substantial harm without the outweighing public benefits. This is a much more subjective opinion that we have sought from our conservation officer. I think if that had been the only reason suggested for a refusal, then I would be less inclined to support the officer's recommendation. But given that the secondary reason for refusal is the expert opinion of the highways officer, I think I would agree with Councillor Dew that it would be very unwise of us to disregard their opinion. They are a statutory consultee. We must consult them on applications of this kind. And if they are not in approval, then I think that one is quite convincing to me, much more than the first reason. So for those reasons, I'm happy to second Councillor Niche's proposal.
Are there any other councillors wishing to contribute to the discussion? Councillor Niche?
Thank you, Chair. It would be remiss of me, because I do always mention it when the parish council have not attended. I am aware why they haven't attended, because they've got an appeal going on and they're rather busy on that aspect, but I would still mention it, that it is disappointing that they haven't attended to submit their reasons as well.
Thank you very much. In that case, as we have a proposal for refusal from Councillor Niche, and that's been seconded by Councillor Davenport-Ray, we will move to a vote. All those who are for refusal, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
So that is unanimous and that has been passed. We will move on. Sorry, we will refuse. This has been refused. We will move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is appeals decisions, to consider the report by the Planning Service Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Our Planning Service Manager has taken some leave, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me as Chief Planning Officer tonight to take you through the appeals
So in your packs, you'll have received an update relating to 3 appeals, albeit across 2 sites. And probably the one I will draw your attention to is the first one, which is in Huntingdon, which was regarding an appeal against non-determination of an application for condition discharge. And that's probably not one that you'll see regularly here at DMC. So just for the avoidance of doubt, an application, as the local planning authority, we will receive applications called Section 73 applications to remove or vary planning conditions. They are treated, to all intents and purposes, the same way as a planning application. We are bound to determine them within a fixed period of time, or, as we've seen in this case, the applicant has exercised their right to submit a non-determination appeal. In this scenario, yes, the determination of the application fell outside the deemed timescales. So it's for that reason the applicant lodged their appeal, but also too, in part, recognising that when the original application was presented to this very committee, it was actually this committee that imposed the time condition in any event in the first instance. So in this case, the inspector has determined that appeal, has determined that there was merit in removing the condition. But again, under Section 73 is to remove or vary the condition. So what the inspector has done in this case is removed the condition as requested, but in its place imposed another condition around a temporary time scale attached to this to allow the local planning authority and with our colleagues, say in environmental health, etc., to actually monitor the impact of this establishment having longer hours of operation. So what we'll expect to see is, should they implement this, we would expect to see them back within a couple of years, again, to vary or remove the condition to potentially establish permanence. But at that point, we will have the evidence before us to consider, the evidence before us to bring to you if we are in a position where it cannot be determined under delegated powers to take a view at that point in time. I believe the other appeals, which are joint appeals for one site, I believe they were much more straightforward, but again, happy to take any questions should they arise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our agenda. But before finishing, I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Davenport-Ray for all her contributions to this committee as she moves on to a different committee. And just thank you to everybody else for your contributions this evening. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you.